Sometimes the most powerful people in the world wear no uniform at all. Sometimes they carry no weapons, hold no rank, and command no troops. Sometimes they are found in the most unexpected places, doing the most ordinary things, while harboring secrets that could change everything. What if I told you that a woman working as a night janitor in a military hospital would one day receive salutes from four of America's most decorated generals? What if I told you that the same woman who was publicly humiliated and mocked by an arrogant Navy SEAL would later be revealed as someone whose contributions to national security were so classified, so vital, that even presidents sought her counsel? This isn't a story about revenge. It's not about getting back at someone who wronged you. This is about something far more powerful. It's about the invisible heroes walking among us, the quiet guardians whose sacrifices remain hidden in shadows, and how sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding behind the most ordinary masks. Her name was Sarah Chun, and for 3 years, she mopped floors, emptied trash cans, and cleaned windows at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Every night, she moved through those sterile corridors like a ghost, invisible to the doctors, nurses, and patients who saw only a middle-aged Asian woman in a janitor's uniform. They had no idea they were in the presence of someone whose mind had helped prevent 3 major terrorist attacks, whose algorithms had saved thousands of lives, and whose work was so sensitive that her very existence was known to fewer than 20 people in the entire world. But on one cold February morning, all of that was about to change. A moment of cruelty from someone who thought he knew better would set in motion a chain of events that would reveal the truth about Sarah Chun, and remind everyone that heroes don't always look like what we expect them to. Sarah Chun adjusted her grip on the mop handle as she made her way down the long corridor of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the polished linoleum floor. It was 2:30 in the morning, and the hospital had settled into its quietest hours. Most patients were asleep. The day shift had gone home hours ago, and only a skeleton crew of night nurses and security guards remained to keep watch over the wounded warriors recovering within these walls. For 3 years, Sarah had walked these same corridors every night, invisible to almost everyone she encountered. She knew which rooms housed the most critically wounded soldiers, which nurses worked the graveyard shift, and which vending machines needed exact change. She knew that Lieutenant Morrison in room 314 had nightmares every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., and that Sergeant Williams in 227 kept his medals in a shoebox under his bed because he felt he didn't deserve them. Sarah knew all of this because she listened. While she cleaned, while she emptied trash cans and replaced burned-out light bulbs, she absorbed the conversations, the whispered fears, the quiet moments of hope and despair that filled these halls. To everyone else, she was just another member of the invisible army of service workers who kept the hospital running. A middle-aged Asian woman with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the same blue uniform day after day, never speaking unless spoken to, never drawing attention to herself. But Sarah Chun was not what she appeared to be. Born in San Francisco to parents who had fled Vietnam in 1975, Sarah had shown an extraordinary aptitude for mathematics and computer science from an early age. By the time she was 12, she was solving calculus problems that stumped her high school teachers. At 15, she earned a full scholarship to MIT, where she completed dual degrees in computer science and applied mathematics in just 3 years. Her doctoral thesis on predictive algorithms and pattern recognition caught the attention of a man in a dark suit who approached her at graduation with an offer that would change her life forever. For the next 25 years, Sarah Chun worked for an organization so classified that it had no official name, no public address, and no acknowledgement of its existence in any government document. Her colleagues called it simply the shop, and its mission was to identify and prevent threats to national security using the most advanced computational methods available. Sarah's specialty was behavioral prediction algorithms, computer programs that could analyze vast amounts of data to identify potential terrorist threats, prevent attacks, and save lives. Her work had contributed to stopping the bombing of the Golden Gate Bridge in 2018, had helped identify a cell planning an attack on Times Square during New Year's Eve 2019, and had prevented what intelligence analysts believed would have been the largest coordinated terrorist attack on American soil since September 11th. Sarah's algorithms had saved thousands of lives, but her name appeared on no commendations, no award ceremonies, no official records of any kind. 3 years ago, everything changed. A security breach at the shop had compromised the identities of several deep-cover operatives, including Sarah. While investigators worked to identify the source of the leak, all exposed operatives were relocated and given new identities. Sarah could have chosen any cover she wanted: suburban housewife, small business owner, college professor. Instead, she chose to become a janitor at Walter Reed. The decision puzzled her handlers, but Sarah had her reasons. She had spent decades analyzing threats from a distance, studying data points and probability matrices without ever seeing the real faces of the people she was trying to protect. The wounded soldiers at Walter Reed represented something she had never experienced before: direct contact with the human cost of the battles she helped fight from behind a computer screen. So she became invisible in plain sight, taking a job that would allow her to observe, to listen, and to understand the real impact of her work. Every night, as she cleaned rooms filled with soldiers missing limbs, struggling with PTSD, and fighting to rebuild their lives, Sarah was reminded of why her work mattered. These weren't just data points in her algorithms. They were young men and women who had sacrificed everything for their country, and her job was to make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. 6 months, maybe a year at most, until the security breach could be resolved and Sarah could return to her real work. But the investigation dragged on. Bureaucratic wheels turned slowly, and Sarah found herself settling into her new life. She rented a small apartment 15 minutes from the hospital, learned the bus routes, and discovered that there was something oddly peaceful about the simple routine of cleaning and maintaining. Her only contact with her former life was through encrypted messages delivered by a man who introduced himself as Jim, though Sarah suspected that wasn't his real name. Once a month, Jim would appear at the hospital cafeteria during Sarah's lunch break, order a turkey sandwich and black coffee, and sit at the table next to hers. Without speaking or making eye contact, he would leave behind a newspaper with coded messages hidden in the classified ads. These messages kept Sarah informed about ongoing operations, requested her analysis on specific threats, and provided updates on the investigation into the security breach. But as months turned into years, Sarah began to wonder if she would ever return to her former life. The investigation had stalled, new security protocols had been implemented, and the shop seemed to be functioning fine without her. Sometimes, in the darkest hours of the night, Sarah wondered if she had been forgotten entirely, relegated to permanent exile in a world where her greatest intellectual gift was knowing which cleaning supplies worked best on different types of stains. It was during one of these contemplative moments that Sarah encountered Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thompson. Thompson was a decorated veteran with 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 Bronze Stars, recovering from surgery to repair nerve damage in his left shoulder. He was also, Sarah quickly realized, the type of man who believed his military achievements gave him the right to treat service workers as inferior beings. Their first encounter happened on a Tuesday night in early February. Sarah was cleaning the bathroom in Thompson's private room when he returned from a late-night walk around the hospital grounds. She had knocked and announced herself before entering, following proper protocol, and had nearly finished her work when Thompson burst through the door. "What the hell are you doing in here?" he demanded, his voice carrying the authoritative bark of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Sarah looked up from the sink she was scrubbing. "Cleaning, sir. I announced myself when I came in." "I don't care what you announced," Thompson snapped. "I was gone for 5 minutes. Couldn't you wait?" "The cleaning schedule requires all rooms to be serviced between 2 and 6 a.m., Sarah replied calmly. "I'll be finished in just a moment." Thompson stepped closer, his presence clearly intended to intimidate. Do you know who I am? Sarah continued cleaning. You're a patient, sir. That's all I need to know to do my job. I'm Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thompson, United States Navy SEALs. I've killed more enemy combatants than you've probably ever seen on TV. I've been in situations that would make your worst nightmares look like children's stories. And I'm not going to be lectured about schedules by some immigrant cleaning lady who probably doesn't even speak English properly. The racism in his words hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she had learned long ago to control her emotional reactions. In her previous life, maintaining composure under pressure had often meant the difference between identifying a legitimate threat and missing a critical detail that could cost lives. She finished cleaning the sink, gathered her supplies, and prepared to leave without responding to Thompson's provocation. But Thompson wasn't finished. That's right, just shuffle along. Don't you people ever learn to speak up for yourselves? Or are you too busy sending money back to whatever rice paddy you crawled out of? Sarah stopped at the door and turned to face him. For just a moment, the janitor's mask slipped, and Thompson found himself looking into the eyes of someone who had seen things that would make his nightmares look like pleasant dreams. Someone who had prevented attacks that would have killed thousands, who had outsmarted terrorists, foreign agents, and some of the most dangerous people on Earth. Someone whose mind was a weapon more precise and deadly than any gun Thompson had ever carried. But the moment passed quickly. Sarah simply nodded politely and said, "Have a good evening, sir." As she walked away, Thompson called after her. "That's what I thought. You people are all the same. Can't handle confrontation. Can't stand up for yourselves. No wonder your countries are such disasters." Sarah didn't respond, but Thompson's words followed her down the corridor like poison. She had endured racism before, of course. Even in her highly classified work, she had encountered people who doubted her abilities based on her appearance, who assumed she was less capable because she was an Asian woman. But those people had learned quickly to respect her intellect once they saw what she could accomplish. This was different. This was pure, ignorant hatred from someone who saw her only as a target for his frustration and prejudice. Someone who had no idea that the woman he was mocking had done more to protect American lives than he could imagine. For the rest of that night, Sarah went through her cleaning routine mechanically, her mind processing Thompson's words and their implications. She had spent 3 years in this job without incident, maintaining her cover perfectly and causing no problems for anyone. But Thompson's behavior suggested that her quiet existence might not remain quiet much longer. Over the following weeks, Thompson's harassment escalated. He complained to the hospital administration about Sarah's attitude, claiming she was disrespectful and insubordinate. He made sure to be present whenever she cleaned his room, offering commentary about her work, her appearance, and her presumed immigration status. He encouraged other patients to join in his mockery, turning Sarah into a target for anyone looking for someone to blame for their frustrations. The hospital administration was caught in a difficult position. Thompson was a decorated war hero whose complaints couldn't be easily dismissed, but Sarah was a model employee who had never received a single complaint in 3 years of work. They spoke with Sarah about the situation, asking if she wanted to file a formal complaint or request reassignment to a different wing of the hospital. Sarah declined both options. She couldn't explain to her supervisors that filing official paperwork might compromise her cover, or that reassignment might interfere with her ability to monitor the coded messages she received through Jim's monthly visits. Instead, she assured them that she could handle the situation professionally and requested no special accommodations. This response only seemed to embolden Thompson further. If the cleaning lady wasn't going to fight back, if the administration wasn't going to take decisive action, then he could continue his campaign of harassment without consequences. He began timing his activities to coincide with Sarah's cleaning schedule, ensuring maximum opportunity for humiliation and abuse. The breaking point came on a cold February morning when Sarah was cleaning the main reception area near the hospital's front entrance. It was 5:30 a.m., near the end of her shift, and she was looking forward to going home to her small apartment and trying to get some sleep before her next shift began. Thompson appeared in the reception area with two other patients he had befriended during his stay, both younger soldiers who seemed eager to impress the decorated SEAL officer. Thompson pointed at Sarah and spoke loudly enough for everyone in the area to hear. "See that woman over there? Perfect example of everything wrong with this country's immigration policies. Here illegally, probably taking jobs away from real Americans. Can't even speak proper English, but somehow she's working in a military hospital with access to sensitive areas. Makes you wonder about security, doesn't it?" The younger soldiers laughed nervously, unsure whether they should participate in Thompson's harassment, but unwilling to challenge a superior officer. A few early morning staff members glanced over, but avoided getting involved, either because they didn't want to confront a patient or because they weren't sure what they had witnessed. Sarah continued mopping the floor, her movements steady and methodical. But inside, something was shifting. For 3 years, she had maintained perfect cover, endured the monotony of manual labor, and accepted her exile from the intellectual challenges she craved. She had done all of this in service to her country, just as surely as any soldier in uniform. But Thompson's accusation about security crossed a line. The suggestion that she might be a threat to the very institution where wounded soldiers receive care struck at the heart of everything Sarah had dedicated her life to protecting. She had prevented real security threats, had worked tirelessly to keep Americans safe, and had sacrificed her career and identity to maintain operational security. As Thompson continued his performance for his audience, building to what he clearly intended as a grand finale of humiliation, Sarah made a decision. She had tolerated personal attacks, endured racist taunts, and accepted professional disrespect. But she would not allow anyone to question her loyalty to the United States of America, especially not in a place dedicated to caring for the heroes who had sacrificed so much in service to their country. Sarah finished mopping the area around Thompson's feet, then looked directly at him for the first time since their encounters began. "Is there anything else I can help you with today, sir?" she asked quietly. Thompson smiled, sensing what he believed was an opportunity for a final, decisive victory. "Actually, yes. You can help by explaining to everyone here how someone like you ends up with access to a military hospital. What's your immigration status? Are you even supposed to be in this country?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Thompson clearly expected Sarah to either break down in humiliation or retreat in defeat, providing him with a satisfying conclusion to weeks of harassment. He had no way of knowing that he had just asked the wrong question to the wrong person at exactly the wrong time. Because in that moment, standing in the reception area of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center with a mop in her hand and years of suppressed frustration burning in her chest, Dr. Sarah Chun, former senior analyst for the most classified intelligence organization in the United States government, decided that her cover had been compromised long enough. What happened next would change everything for both of them, and would set in motion a chain of events that would bring 4 of America's most decorated generals to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center to personally address the woman that Marcus Thompson had so carelessly chosen to humiliate. But first, Sarah had a phone call to make. Sarah's shift ended at 6 a.m., but instead of taking the bus home to her small apartment, she walked 3 blocks to a payphone outside a 24-hour diner. The morning air was crisp, and her breath formed small clouds as she dialed a number she had memorized but never used. It was a number given her 3 years ago with strict instructions to use only in case of absolute emergency. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. No greeting, no identification, just a simple yes. "This is Nightingale," Sarah said, using her operational code name for the first time in 3 years. "I need to speak with Control immediately." There was a pause. "Nightingale has been inactive for 36 months. What is the nature of your emergency? My cover has been compromised. I need immediate extraction and debriefing. Stand by." The line went silent except for a faint humming sound that indicated the call was being rerouted through multiple encrypted channels. Sarah waited, watching the early morning traffic begin to build as Bethesda slowly came to life around her. After what felt like hours but was probably only 3 minutes, a new voice came on the line. Nightingale, this is Control. Explain your situation. Sarah had rehearsed this conversation in her mind dozens of times over the past 3 years, but now that the moment had arrived, she found herself struggling to find the right words. How could she explain that 3 years of careful cover maintenance had been destroyed, not by enemy action or surveillance detection, but by her own decision to end the harassment of a racist Navy SEAL? Sir, my position at Walter Reed has become untenable. I've been subjected to sustained harassment by a patient who has made public accusations about my immigration status and security clearance. The situation is escalating, and I believe it's only a matter of time before someone begins investigating my background more thoroughly. Has your true identity been discovered? Not yet, sir, but the patient in question is a decorated SEAL officer with connections throughout the military community. If he decides to pursue his suspicions formally, our cover story may not withstand scrutiny. There was another pause. Sarah could almost hear the wheels turning in Control's mind, weighing options and calculating risks. Nightingale, your extraction was scheduled to begin next month anyway. The investigation into the security breach has been completed, and we're ready to bring you back to active duty. Can you maintain your cover for another 4 weeks? Sarah thought about Thompson's escalating behavior, his public accusations, and the way other patients and staff members were beginning to look at her with suspicion. I'm not certain, sir. The harassment is becoming more public and more frequent. I'm concerned that maintaining cover may require me to endure situations that could compromise operational security. Understood. I'm going to send someone to assess the situation personally. In the meantime, continue your normal routine and avoid any actions that might draw additional attention. We'll have you out of there within 72 hours. The call ended, leaving Sarah alone with the morning sounds of suburban Maryland and the weight of a decision that would change everything. She had survived 3 years of exile by becoming invisible, by accepting humiliation and harassment as the price of maintaining her cover. But Thompson's public accusations had crossed a line from personal harassment to operational threat, and Sarah knew that her supervisors would understand her position. What she hadn't expected was how quickly the response would come. Sarah returned to her apartment and tried to sleep, but her mind kept replaying the conversation with Control and wondering what would happen next. She had worked for the shop long enough to know that assessment could mean anything from a simple conversation with her handler to a complete investigation of everyone she had encountered during her 3 years at Walter Reed. The answer came that afternoon when Jim appeared at her apartment door. Jim was a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of forgettable face that made him perfect for intelligence work. In 3 years of monthly meetings, Sarah had never seen him show any emotion stronger than mild interest, so she was surprised to see what looked like genuine concern in his expression. "We need to talk," he said, stepping into her apartment without waiting for an invitation. "Tell me everything about this SEAL." For the next hour, Sarah recounted every interaction she had experienced with Marcus Thompson, from their first encounter to that morning's public confrontation. Jim listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes in a small notebook that he kept in his jacket pocket. "You should have contacted us sooner," he said when Sarah finished her account. "This kind of sustained harassment represents a significant security risk, regardless of your personal ability to endure it." "I thought I could handle it," Sarah replied. "I've dealt with worse things than a racist soldier with anger management problems. The difference is that those other situations were part of your job. This was supposed to be a safe assignment where you could maintain low visibility while we resolved the security breach. Instead, you've become the target of someone with the resources and connections to cause serious problems for our operation." Jim's expression grew more serious. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The security breach that forced your relocation was more serious than we initially believed. We discovered that a foreign intelligence service had penetrated our organization and gained access to the identities of several deep cover operatives. 3 of our people were killed before we could relocate them." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in her apartment. She had assumed the security breach was a simple computer hack or document theft, not a penetration that had cost lives. The investigation revealed that our enemies were using a sophisticated pattern analysis program to identify operatives based on their behavior, financial records, and social connections. Your decision to take a janitorial position at a military hospital was actually brilliant from a security standpoint. It was so unexpected that it didn't match any of their prediction models. But Thompson's harassment changes that equation, Sarah realized. Exactly. If he files formal complaints about your behavior or security status, those complaints will generate paperwork. Paperwork creates a trail that can be analyzed. And if our enemies are still running their identification programs, any unusual attention focused on a hospital janitor might trigger additional investigation. Jim stood up and moved to the window, checking the street outside with the casual professionalism of someone who had survived decades in the intelligence business. There's something else, he continued. Thompson isn't just any Navy SEAL. His last assignment was with a joint task force that worked closely with several intelligence agencies, including ours. He has security clearances and connections that could allow him to dig much deeper into your background than a typical patient. Sarah felt the walls of her carefully constructed new life beginning to close in around her. What are my options? We're accelerating your extraction. You'll be out of Walter Reed by Friday, with a new identity and assignment by the end of next week. But first, we need to neutralize the threat Thompson represents. What kind of neutralization are we talking about? Jim smiled for the first time since arriving. Nothing dramatic. Thompson is scheduled to be discharged from Walter Reed tomorrow. His recovery is complete, and he's been cleared to return to active duty. We're simply going to ensure that his return to duty takes him very far away from here, where he'll be much too busy to pursue any lingering questions about a hospital janitor. And if he's already shared his suspicions with other people, we've been monitoring his communications since you contacted us this morning. He's complained about you to several people, but always in general terms about hospital staff and immigration issues. Nothing specific enough to trigger an investigation. Jim gathered his notebook and prepared to leave. Continue your normal routine for the next 3 days. Don't vary your schedule, don't change your behavior, and don't give Thompson any additional reasons to focus on you. On Friday morning, you'll receive a call telling you that a family emergency requires you to take immediate leave. By Friday afternoon, Sarah Chun, the janitor, will cease to exist. After Jim left, Sarah sat in her small apartment and tried to process everything she had learned. 3 years ago, she had thought she was simply hiding from a security breach until it could be resolved. Now she discovered that the breach had been a targeted attack by foreign agents, that operatives had been killed, and that her own survival had depended on a decision that everyone had thought was strange at the time. The next 2 days passed slowly. Sarah went to work, performed her cleaning duties, and endured Thompson's continued harassment with the knowledge that it would all be over soon. Thompson seemed emboldened by what he perceived as her complete passivity, and his comments became more aggressive and public. "Look at her, just taking it," he said loudly to his audience of younger soldiers on Wednesday night. "No pride, no backbone, no fight. That's what's wrong with these people. They come here and take advantage of American generosity, but they'll never really be Americans because they don't have the courage to stand up for themselves." Sarah continued mopping the floor around his feet, but inside she was counting down the hours until she could return to work that actually mattered. Work where her intelligence and skills were valued, where she could make a real difference in protecting the country that Thompson claimed she could never truly belong to. Thursday night brought the final confrontation. Thompson had been drinking, not heavily enough to be obviously intoxicated, but enough to lower his inhibitions and amplify his aggression. He cornered Sarah in a supply closet where she was restocking cleaning materials, blocking the doorway with his body and forcing her to listen to a drunken lecture about American values and the proper place of immigrants in society. "You want to know what really pisses me off about people like you?" he said, swaying slightly as he spoke. "You take everything this country offers, jobs, healthcare, protection, but you never give anything back. You never serve, never sacrifice, Never put anything on the line for the country that's given you everything. Sarah carefully placed a bottle of disinfectant on the shelf and turned to face him. How do you know what I've given to this country? The question seemed to catch Thompson off guard. In all their previous encounters, Sarah had never challenged his assumptions or asked him to justify his statements. Because I can see what you are, he replied after a moment. You're a service worker, probably illegal, definitely ungrateful. People like you don't serve their country. You serve yourselves. And people like you always know exactly who serves and who doesn't. Thompson's expression darkened. I know that I've bled for this country. I know that I've killed for it. And I'd die for it if necessary. I know that I've earned the right to expect better from the people who benefit from my sacrifice. Sarah studied his face for a moment, seeing not just the arrogance and racism that had tormented her for weeks, but also something else, a deep insecurity masked by bluster, a need to prove his worth by diminishing others, a fundamental misunderstanding of what service and sacrifice actually meant. You're right, she said quietly. You have served your country, and you've sacrificed for it. But service comes in many forms, and sacrifice isn't always visible. Before Thompson could respond, Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and saw the number she had been expecting. Excuse me, she said to Thompson. I need to take this call. She answered the phone and listened to a brief, coded message about a family emergency requiring immediate departure. The performance was for Thompson's benefit, maintaining the fiction that Sarah Chun was simply a janitor with a family crisis rather than a deep-cover intelligence operative being extracted from a compromised assignment. After ending the call, Sarah looked back at Thompson. I have to go. Family emergency. Of course you do, Thompson sneered. Run away, just like I figured you would. Can't handle the heat when someone tells you the truth about yourself. Sarah gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to leave the supply closet. At the doorway, she paused and looked back at Thompson one final time. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, she said, using his rank for the first time, I hope you find what you're looking for. Before he could ask what she meant, Sarah was gone, walking down the corridor toward the hospital exit and leaving behind 3 years of carefully maintained invisibility. She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, 4 of the most powerful men in the United States military would be flying to Walter Reed to have a very different kind of conversation with Marcus Thompson about the nature of service, sacrifice, and the woman he had so carelessly chosen to harass. The extraction was scheduled for Friday morning, but the real drama was just beginning. Marcus Thompson woke up Friday morning with a splitting headache and a vague sense of unease that had nothing to do with the previous night's drinking. His discharge paperwork had been processed, his new assignment orders had arrived, and he was scheduled to leave Walter Reed within hours. But something about his final conversation with the cleaning woman bothered him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The way she had used his rank, the tone of her voice when she said she hoped he found what he was looking for, it suggested a level of familiarity with military protocol that seemed inconsistent with someone he had dismissed as an uneducated immigrant. Thompson pushed the thought aside, attributing his discomfort to post-surgery stress and the natural anxiety that came with returning to active duty. He was packing his personal belongings when a nurse knocked on his door and informed him that Colonel Martinez, the hospital's chief administrator, needed to see him immediately in the main conference room. Thompson assumed it was routine exit processing, perhaps a final medical evaluation or administrative detail that needed to be resolved before his departure. The conference room was on the 3rd floor, down a corridor Thompson had never explored during his stay at Walter Reed. As he approached the designated room, he noticed an unusual level of activity in the area. Several men in expensive suits were speaking quietly in the hallway, and 2 military police officers stood at attention near the entrance to the conference room. Thompson knocked on the door and was invited to enter. Inside, he found Colonel Martinez sitting at a large conference table alongside 3 men Thompson didn't recognize. All 3 wore suits rather than uniforms, but something about their bearing and demeanor suggested high-level military or intelligence personnel. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, Colonel Martinez said, gesturing to an empty chair. Please have a seat. These gentlemen would like to speak with you about your time here at Walter Reed. Thompson sat down, suddenly aware that this was not routine exit processing. Is there a problem, sir? One of the suited men leaned forward. He was probably in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of calm authority that suggested decades of high-level responsibility. When he spoke, his voice carried the measured tone of someone accustomed to delivering information that could change lives. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, my name is Director Harrison. I represent an organization that handles sensitive national security matters. We need to discuss your interactions with a member of the hospital's maintenance staff, specifically a woman named Sarah Chun. Thompson felt his stomach clench, but forced himself to maintain a calm exterior. Sir, if this is about my complaints regarding that woman's attitude and professionalism, I stand by everything I've reported. She was disrespectful, insubordinate, and, frankly, I had concerns about security protocols that allowed someone like her access to sensitive areas of a military hospital. The three men exchanged glances that Thompson couldn't interpret. Director Harrison continued. Can you elaborate on what you mean by someone like her? Sir, I questioned whether her immigration status and security clearance had been properly vetted. Her behavior suggested someone who didn't respect American military personnel or understand the importance of proper protocols in a facility like this. I see. And these concerns were based on what specific behaviors? Thompson had rehearsed this conversation in his mind multiple times over the past weeks, preparing to justify his complaints if questioned by hospital administration. Sir, she showed a lack of proper deference to military personnel, failed to follow established cleaning schedules when requested, and generally displayed an attitude inconsistent with someone who should feel grateful for the opportunity to work in an American military facility. Director Harrison made a note in a small notebook. Lieutenant Commander, how long have you been in military? 15 years, sir. 3 tours in Afghanistan, multiple commendations, Bronze Star with Valor Device. Impressive record. In those 15 years, how many classified operations have you been involved in? Sir, I'm not sure I understand the relevance of that question. Please answer the question, Lieutenant Commander. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I've been involved in numerous classified operations, sir. The exact number would depend on how you define the term. Let's say operations that were classified at the top secret level or above. Maybe a dozen, sir. Possibly more. And how many of those operations do you believe prevented direct attacks on American soil? Sir, most of my service has been overseas. The operations I've been involved in were generally focused on eliminating threats in theater rather than preventing attacks on the homeland. Director Harrison nodded thoughtfully. So you would estimate that your direct contribution to preventing terrorist attacks within the United States has been relatively limited? Thompson's discomfort was growing rapidly. Sir, I'm not sure where this line of questioning is leading, but I want to emphasize that my service record speaks for itself. I've served my country with honor and distinction, and I've earned the right to expect proper treatment from all hospital personnel, regardless of their background. Of course you have. Director Harrison agreed. Your service record is indeed impressive, and no one questions your dedication or courage. But I want to make sure you understand the full context of your interactions with Sarah Chun. Harrison opened a file folder and removed a single sheet of paper. Lieutenant Commander, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. You will not repeat this information to anyone, and you will not discuss the details of this conversation outside of this room. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Sarah Chun is not who you think she is. For the past 25 years, she has been one of our most valuable intelligence operatives, specializing in counterterrorism and threat assessment. Her work has directly prevented at least 17 major terrorist attacks on American soil, including 3 that would have killed thousands of people. Thompson felt the room begin to spin slightly. Sir, that's impossible. She's a janitor. She doesn't speak proper English. She has no education. She's obviously an immigrant who She has a PhD in computer science from MIT and a master's degree in applied mathematics from Stanford. Harrison interrupted. She speaks 5 languages fluently, including Mandarin, Vietnamese, Arabic, and what you call proper English. She was born in San Francisco and has served her country for longer than you've been alive. The silence in the room was deafening. Thompson tried to process what he was hearing, but his mind kept rejecting information that contradicted everything he believed about the woman he had spent weeks humiliating. Sir, if what you're saying is true, then why was she working as a janitor? Why didn't she identify herself when I questioned her status? Because she was on a deep cover assignment that required her to maintain absolute anonymity. The janitorial position was part of an operation so sensitive that only a handful of people in the entire government were aware of her true identity. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Lieutenant Commander, do you remember the attempted bombing of the Golden Gate Bridge in 2018? Yes, sir. The attack was prevented by intelligence services. Sarah Chin's analysis identified the threat and tracked down the perpetrators. Do you remember the planned attack on Times Square during New Year's Eve 2019? Yes, sir. Sarah Chun prevented that attack. The coordinated cell that was planning to detonate explosives in shopping malls across the country last Christmas? Sarah Chun identified the network and provided the intelligence that led to their arrest. Harrison continued, his voice growing more intense. While you were overseas fighting battles against enemies you could see and engage directly, Sarah Chan was fighting a different kind of war against enemies who hide in shadows and blend into civilian populations. She has saved more American lives than most entire military units, and she has done it all in complete anonymity because that's what the mission required. Thompson felt physically ill. The full weight of his behavior over the past weeks was beginning to crash down on him like a collapsing building. Sir, I had no way of knowing Dash. Of course you didn't, Harrison said. That was the point. But what troubles us is not that you were unaware of her true identity. What troubles us is the nature of your behavior towards someone you perceived as powerless to defend herself. One of the other suited men spoke for the first time. Lieutenant Commander, we've reviewed recordings of your interactions with Dr. Chun. Audio surveillance is standard in military hospitals for security purposes. Would you like us to play back some of your comments about immigrants, rice paddies, and proper English? Thompson's face burned with shame and embarrassment. Sir, my behavior was inappropriate regardless of who she was. I let my frustrations get the better of me, and I said things that don't reflect my true values or beliefs. Did you? Harrison asked. Because from where we sit, it looks like your behavior reflected exactly what you believe, that someone's value as a human being and an American can be determined by their appearance, their accent, and their job title. Harrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the hospital grounds where Sarah had walked every day for 3 years, enduring Thompson's harassment while carrying secrets that could have changed the world. Lieutenant Commander, we've been very interested in your theory about service and sacrifice. You've suggested repeatedly that Dr. Chun has never served her country, never sacrificed anything for America, and never earned the right to be here. You've argued that visible military service is the only form of contribution that matters, and that people who don't wear uniforms can't possibly understand the meaning of patriotism. Harrison turned back to face Thompson. Here's what I want you to consider. For the past 3 years, Dr. Chun has lived in exile from work she loves, from colleagues she respects, and from the intellectual challenges that defined her entire adult life. She has endured the isolation of deep cover, the monotony of manual labor, and the constant stress of maintaining an identity that contradicts everything she has achieved in her life. She has done all of this not for money, not for recognition, not for advancement, but because her country asked her to and because the mission required it. And during those 3 years, Harrison continued, she has also endured weeks of racist harassment from a decorated military officer who assumed he had the right to humiliate her because she appeared to be powerless to fight back. She could have ended that harassment at any time by revealing who she really was, but doing so would have compromised an operation that was critical to national security. Harrison sat back down and looked directly at Thompson. So tell me, Lieutenant Commander, who in this situation demonstrated real service to their country. The person who endured harassment and isolation in service to a mission larger than themselves, or the person who used their position and authority to torment someone they perceived as inferior. Thompson tried to speak, but found that no words came. Everything he had said, every assumption he had made, every moment of cruelty he had inflicted was replaying in his mind with a horrible clarity of complete understanding. "Sir," he finally managed, "is there anything I can do to make this right? Any way to apologize or make amends for my behavior?" Harrison shook his head. "Dr. Chun was extracted from this assignment yesterday. She's already begun debriefing for her next mission. Your interaction with her is over, Lieutenant Commander, but the consequences of that interaction are just beginning. Sir, your new assignment orders are being revised as we speak. Instead of returning to active duty with your SEAL team, you're being transferred to a desk job at the Pentagon, where you'll spend the next 2 years analyzing intelligence reports and writing briefings for senior officials. Consider it an opportunity to learn about the kinds of work that people like Dr. Chun do every day to keep America safe." Thompson felt his career collapsing around him. A desk job at the Pentagon was career death for a SEAL officer, a clear signal that his judgment and leadership abilities have been found wanting. "Sir, with respect, my medical leave is over and I'm cleared for active duty. I've served with distinction for 15 years, and for the past month, you've demonstrated that 15 years of distinguished service can be undermined by a few weeks of poor judgment and prejudicial behavior," Harrison replied. "The military cannot afford leaders who make critical decisions based on assumptions, stereotypes, and personal bias." Harrison gathered his papers and prepared to leave. "Lieutenant Commander, you asked Dr. Chun what she had given to this country. The answer is everything. Her anonymity, her recognition, her personal safety, and ultimately her tolerance for the kind of treatment you subjected her to. She gave all of that in service to a mission that was more important than her personal comfort or dignity. The question you should be asking yourself is, what have you given lately other than evidence that your judgment is compromised by prejudice?" As the 3 men prepared to leave the conference room, Harrison paused at the door. "Oh, and Lieutenant Commander, later today, you'll be receiving visitors who want to discuss your interactions with Dr. Chun in more detail. I'd suggest you use the time between now and then to think very carefully about how you want to answer their questions." After they left, Thompson sat alone in the conference room, staring at the table and trying to process the complete destruction of everything he thought he knew about the past month of his life. The woman he had mocked and humiliated was one of the most important intelligence operatives in the United States government. The person he had accused of not serving her country had prevented more attacks than he could imagine. The immigrant he had told to go back where she came from was more American than most people born here. But worse than the embarrassment and professional consequences was the growing realization of what his behavior said about him as a person. He had used his position and authority to torment someone he perceived as powerless, had taken pleasure in humiliating someone he thought couldn't fight back, and had justified it all with prejudices and assumptions that revealed the ugliest parts of his character. Thompson was still sitting in the conference room an hour later when Colonel Martinez returned with news that 4 general officers had arrived at Walter Reed and requested an immediate meeting with him. As Thompson walked toward what would be the most difficult conversation of his military career, he finally understood what Sarah Chun had meant when she said she hoped he found what he was looking for. He had been looking for someone to blame for his frustrations, someone to diminish so he could feel larger, someone to humiliate so he could feel powerful. Instead, he had found a mirror that reflected back every failing in his character and every limit to his understanding of what real service actually meant. The reckoning was just beginning. The 4 men waiting in the hospital's executive conference room represented more combined military authority than most officers would encounter in their entire careers. General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, sat at the head of the table with the bearing of someone who had commanded respect in rooms where the fate of nations was decided. To her right sat General Robert Chun, no relation to Sarah despite sharing her surname, who oversaw the Defense Intelligence Agency's most sensitive operations. General Michael Torres, former commander of Special Operations Command, occupied the chair to Hayes' left, while General James Morrison, deputy director of the National Security Agency, completed the group. Marcus Thompson entered the room and immediately recognized the significance of the assembled authority. 4 stars each, representing the absolute pinnacle of American military leadership, had traveled to Walter Reed for the sole purpose of discussing his interactions with a woman he had dismissed as an insignificant cleaning lady. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, General Hayes said without preamble. "Please be seated." Thompson took the only empty chair, directly across from General Hayes, and waited for what he knew would be the most consequential conversation of his military career. "We're here to discuss Dr. Sarah Chun," General Hayes began. "I understand that Director Harrison has already briefed you on her actual identity and role within our intelligence community. What Director Harrison did not tell you is that Dr. Chin's work has been integral to operations that each of us has overseen during our careers." General Chun leaned forward. "Lieutenant Commander, are you familiar with Operation Dark Star?" "No, sir. It was a joint counterterrorism operation conducted in 2020 that prevented what our analysts believe would have been the most devastating attack on American soil since September 11th. Dr. Chin's algorithmic analysis identified a network of sleeper cells that had been operating undetected for over 5 years. Without her work, we estimate that coordinated attacks in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago would have killed more than 8,000 people. General Torres spoke next. "Are you familiar with the Tehran extraction, Lieutenant Commander?" "No, sir. Classified operation in 2019. 3 of our intelligence operatives were captured in Iran and sentenced to execution as spies. Dr. Chin's analysis of Iranian communication patterns and behavioral data allowed us to identify the exact facility where they were being held and plan a rescue operation that brought all 3 home safely." General Morrison opened a file folder and removed several photographs. "Lieutenant Commander, these are satellite images of what we call the Mumbai Network, a terrorist organization that was planning to use chemical weapons against civilian targets in 12 different countries. Dr. Chun identified this network in 2021 and tracked their activities for 18 months, providing intelligence that allowed law enforcement agencies around the world to conduct coordinated raids that prevented attacks and saved an estimated 20,000 lives." Thompson stared at the photographs, trying to reconcile the images of terrorist compounds and chemical weapon facilities with the woman he had seen mopping floors and emptying trash cans. "Sir," Thompson said carefully, "I'm beginning to understand the scope of Dr. Chin's contributions to national security. But I'm not sure I understand why this requires the attention of 4 general officers." General Hayes smiled grimly. "Because, Lieutenant Commander, Dr. Chun has requested something that no operative of her caliber and importance has ever requested in the history of our intelligence services. She is asked to retire from active duty and return to civilian life. Sir, for 25 years, Dr. Chin has served her country with distinction, loyalty, and complete anonymity. She has prevented attacks, saved lives, and protected American interests around the world. She has sacrificed personal relationships, professional recognition, and any hope of a normal life in service to missions that couldn't exist without her unique skills." General Hayes stood up and moved to a wall map showing global hotspots where American intelligence services maintained operations. In all of those years, through all of those sacrifices, Dr. Chin never once complained about her assignments, never requested special accommodations, and never showed any sign that she was anything less than completely committed to her work. Until last week, General Torres added, when she contacted her supervisors and requested immediate extraction from what was supposed to be a routine cover assignment at this hospital. General Chun consulted his notes. According to Dr. Chin's report, her cover was compromised not by enemy action or surveillance detection, but by the sustained harassment of a military officer who made her position untenable through racist attacks and public accusations about her loyalty to the United States. The room fell silent as the implications of this statement settled over Thompson like a heavy blanket. Not only had his behavior exposed a critical intelligence operative, but it had also driven one of the country's most valuable assets to consider abandoning her career entirely. "Lieutenant Commander," General Hayes said, returning to her seat, "we want you to understand something. Dr. Chun could have ended your harassment at any time. A single phone call to any of us would have resulted in your immediate transfer to the most unpleasant assignment we could devise. But she didn't make that call because doing so would have compromised her mission. Instead," General Morrison continued, "she endured weeks of racist taunts, professional humiliation, and public accusations about her loyalty. She absorbed all of that abuse because she believed her mission was more important than her personal comfort." General Torres leaned back in his chair. "Let me ask you something, Lieutenant Commander. In your 15 years of military service, how many times have you personally sacrificed your own well-being for the success of a mission?" Thompson thought about his deployments, his combat operations, and the various hardships he had endured in service to his country. "Many times, sir. It's part of being a SEAL." "And did you receive recognition for those sacrifices? Commendations, promotions, the respect of your peers and superiors?" "Yes, sir. Most of the time. Dr. Chun has made similar sacrifices for 25 years, Lieutenant Commander. But she has never received a single public commendation, never been promoted in a ceremony, never had her achievements recognized by anyone outside of this room. Her sacrifice has been invisible by design, and her reward has been the knowledge that her work saves lives." General Hayes opened another file folder. "Lieutenant Commander, we've reviewed your service record. You're described as an exemplary officer with outstanding leadership potential. Your superiors have consistently praised your tactical skills, your courage under fire, and your dedication to your men. Until recently, you were being considered for promotion to commander and assignment to a prestigious training position." Thompson felt his stomach sink as he realized where this conversation was heading. "But leadership isn't just about tactical skills and courage," General Hayes continued. "It's about judgment, character, and the ability to recognize value in people regardless of their appearance or background. Your treatment of Dr. Chun suggests serious deficiencies in all of those areas." General Morrison placed another set of photographs on the table. "These are pictures of the terrorist attacks that Dr. Chun prevented, Lieutenant Commander. The Golden Gate Bridge bombing that would have killed hundreds. The Times Square attack that would have killed thousands. The shopping mall bombings that would have terrorized the entire country. Every one of these attacks was prevented by a woman you dismissed as an uneducated immigrant who didn't deserve to work in an American military hospital. Every one of these victories was achieved by someone you believed had never served her country or earned the right to be treated with respect." General Chin stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the hospital grounds where Sarah had endured Thompson's harassment day after day. "Lieutenant Commander, we've spent considerable time discussing what Dr. Chun has given to this country. Now I want to talk about what your behavior has cost us. Sir, Dr. Chin's extraction from Walter Reed was supposed to be temporary, a brief interruption while we resolved the security issue. She was scheduled to return to active duty next month with a new assignment that would have utilized her skills to counter an emerging terrorist network in Southeast Asia. Instead, she has informed us that she no longer wishes to continue her intelligence career. She believes that her ability to maintain cover has been permanently compromised, not by enemy action, but by the realization that she can be targeted for harassment and abuse even in what should be the safest possible environment." Thompson felt the weight of this revelation like a physical blow. "Sir, are you saying that my behavior has caused her to retire?" "We're saying that your behavior has cost the United States intelligence community one of its most valuable assets," General Torres replied. "Dr. Chin's unique combination of skills, experience, and analytical ability would have taken decades to replace, if replacement were even possible." General Morrison returned to his seat. "But the loss of Dr. Chin's services is actually the smaller problem, Lieutenant Commander. The larger problem is what your behavior says about the culture and values of our military leadership." "Sir, You held the rank of lieutenant commander in the United States Navy SEALs. You were trusted with the lives of other service members, given access to classified information, and expected to represent the highest ideals of military professionalism. Yet when faced with someone you perceived as powerless, you chose to abuse your position and authority. General Hayes picked up a thick file folder. This contains reports of your interactions with Dr. Chun, including audio recordings of your statements about immigrants, your speculation about her legal status, and your public humiliation of someone you believed couldn't defend herself. If we were to release these recordings to your former teammates, your subordinates, or the broader SEAL community, what do you think their reaction would be? Thompson had no answer. He knew exactly what his teammates would think of an officer who used his position to torment a cleaning lady, regardless of her actual identity. The military works because of trust, Lieutenant Commander. Trust between officers and enlisted personnel, trust between commanders and their subordinates, trust between different services and agencies. Your behavior toward Dr. Chun demonstrates a fundamental breakdown in the judgment and character that makes such trust possible. General Chun returned to the table. We're faced with a dilemma, Lieutenant Commander. Dr. Chun's identity and role must remain classified. We cannot publicly acknowledge her contributions or explain why your treatment of her was so particularly damaging. But we also cannot allow your behavior to go without consequences. Sir, I understand that my actions were wrong, and I'm prepared to accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate. Punishment? General Hayes laughed bitterly. Lieutenant Commander, you seem to think this is about punishment. It's not. It's about leadership and the responsibility that comes with rank and authority. She stood up again, this time moving to stand directly in front of Thompson. You asked Dr. Chun what she had given to this country, but you never asked yourself what you owed to the people under your authority and protection. You never considered that your rank and position carried an obligation to treat all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their apparent status or background. The question isn't what punishment fits your behavior, Lieutenant Commander. The question is whether someone with your demonstrated judgment and character should continue to hold a position of trust and authority in the United States military. General Torres opened his own file folder. Your new assignment orders have been finalized, Lieutenant Commander. You're being transferred to the Pentagon, where you'll spend the next 2 years reviewing intelligence reports and writing analysis briefings. It's important work, but it requires no leadership responsibility and involves no authority over other personnel. After those 2 years, you'll be eligible for retirement at 15 years of service. We strongly encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. Thompson felt his career dissolving before his eyes. Everything he had worked for, everything he had achieved, everything he had planned for his future was being swept away by the consequences of a few weeks of behavior that had seemed justified at the time. Sir, is there any possibility of redemption? Any way to demonstrate that I've learned from this experience and can be trusted with leadership responsibility again? General Morrison shook his head. Lieutenant Commander, leadership isn't just about what you do when people are watching or when your behavior has consequences. It's about who you are when you think no one important is paying attention. Your treatment of Dr. Chun revealed who you really are when you believe you can act without accountability. The military cannot afford leaders who abuse their authority when they think they can get away with it. We cannot trust the lives and welfare of service members to officers whose character only emerges under favorable conditions. General Hayes gathered her papers and prepared to conclude the meeting. Lieutenant Commander, before you leave, I want you to understand something that Director Harrison didn't tell you earlier. Dr. Chin specifically requested that your punishment not include any action that would damage your reputation or career prospects. Thompson looked up in surprise. Sir, even after enduring weeks of harassment and abuse, even after being publicly humiliated and having her loyalty questioned, Dr. Chin asked us to handle your case quietly and without prejudice to your future opportunities. She said that destroying your career would serve no constructive purpose and would not advance any mission that mattered to her. That request, Lieutenant Commander, tells us everything we need to know about Dr. Chen's character. And your treatment of her tells us everything we need to know about yours. As the four generals filed out of the conference room, Thompson was left alone with the complete ruins of his military career and the knowledge that his downfall had been caused not by enemy action or mission failure, but by his own choice to abuse someone he thought was powerless to fight back. But the story was not quite over. There was one more revelation waiting for Thompson, one final lesson about the true nature of service and sacrifice that would complete his education about the woman he had so carelessly chosen to humiliate. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson sat at a desk in the Pentagon's Intelligence Analysis Division, reviewing his 100th report about terrorist financing networks in Southeast Asia. The work was important but mind-numbing, requiring attention to detail, but offering none of the excitement or camaraderie he had known as a SEAL officer. His colleagues treated him politely but distantly, aware that his assignment to a desk job represented some kind of career setback, but not knowing the details. Thompson had settled into a routine of professional competence and personal isolation, completing his assignments efficiently while avoiding any behavior that might draw attention or controversy. He lived alone in a small apartment in Arlington, spent his evenings reading intelligence reports and military history, and tried not to think about the future that had been taken away from him. It was on a humid Tuesday afternoon in August that everything changed again. Thompson was reviewing a report about money transfers between banks in Malaysia when his supervisor, Colonel Davidson, appeared at his cubicle with an unusual expression on his face. "Thompson, I need you to come with me," Davidson said. "There's something happening in conference room C that requires your immediate attention." Thompson followed Davidson through the maze of Pentagon corridors, wondering what kind of crisis could possibly require the input of a disgraced SEAL officer assigned to intelligence analysis. As they approached conference room C, Thompson noticed the same kind of heightened activity he had observed at Walter Reed 6 months earlier. Men in expensive suits speaking quietly, military police standing at attention, and a general sense that something significant was taking place. Davidson opened the conference room door and gestured for Thompson to enter. Inside, he found the same 4 generals who had ended his military career 6 months earlier: Hayes, Chun, Torres, and Morrison. But this time they were not alone. Standing with them was Sarah Chun. Thompson's first thought was how different she looked outside of her janitor's uniform. She wore a simple but elegant dark suit. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. But her eyes were the same eyes Thompson remembered: intelligent, observant, and completely free of any trace of malice or resentment. "Lieutenant Commander Thompson," General Hayes said, "please have a seat. Dr. Chun has requested this meeting." Thompson sat down across from Sarah, uncertain whether he should apologize, explain himself, or simply wait for whatever was about to happen. Sarah studied his face for a moment before speaking. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly. "I wanted to see you before I officially retire." "Dr. Chun," Thompson began, "I owe you an apology that dash." Sarah held up a hand to stop him. "That's not why I'm here. I didn't come to receive an apology or to relitigate the past. I came because I have something to tell you that I think you need to hear." She opened a file folder and removed a single photograph, which she placed on the table in front of Thompson. The image showed a young Navy SEAL officer receiving a Bronze Star Medal from a senior officer in what appeared to be a ceremony at a military base. "Do you recognize this picture, Marcus?" Thompson examined the photograph and felt his heart skip a beat. It was an image from his own award ceremony 3 years earlier, when he had received his Bronze Star for actions during a hostage rescue operation in Afghanistan. "Yes, ma'am. This is from my Bronze Star ceremony." "Do you remember the operation that earned you this medal?" "Of course. We rescued 2 American contractors who were being held by Taliban forces near Kandahar." Sarah nodded. "The intelligence that led to that rescue operation came from my analysis of intercepted communications, satellite imagery, and behavioral pattern recognition. I identified the location where the hostages were being held, predicted the timing of a planned execution, and provided the tactical intelligence that allowed your team to plan and execute the rescue. Thompson stared at the photograph with growing comprehension. You're saying that you were involved in that operation? I'm saying that I was the primary intelligence analyst who made your mission possible. The hostages were rescued. You and your team returned safely, and you were decorated for your courage and skill in executing a dangerous operation. But the operation succeeded because my analysis provided accurate intelligence about enemy positions, timing, and intentions. Sarah removed another photograph from her folder. This image showed Thompson receiving his second Bronze Star 18 months later. Do you remember this operation? Yes, ma'am. We eliminated a high-value target who was planning an attack on American forces. The intelligence that identified that target, tracked his movements, and predicted his location came from algorithms I developed specifically for identifying terrorist leadership networks. Without my analysis, you never would have found him. Sarah continued placing photographs on the table. Images from various awards ceremonies, commendations, and recognition events throughout Thompson's career. With each image, she explained how her intelligence work had contributed to the missions that earned him recognition and advancement. Marcus, I'm not telling you this to diminish your achievements or to claim credit for your service. You and your teammates showed tremendous courage, skill, and dedication in executing these missions. But I want you to understand something that you never considered during our interactions at Walter Reed. Mom, for 15 years, my work has been supporting operations that kept you and thousands of other service members safe. Every algorithm I developed, every analysis I provided, every threat I identified was designed to give people like you the information you needed to come home alive. Thompson felt emotions he couldn't name rising in his chest. Dr. Chun, I had no way of knowing Dash, of course you didn't. That's exactly the point. The support you received, the intelligence that made your missions possible, the analysis that kept you alive, all of that came from people you never saw, never met, and never thanked. People who were working in windowless rooms while you were earning medals and receiving recognition. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Marcus, when you accused me of never serving my country, never sacrificing anything for America, never earning the right to be treated with respect, you were talking about someone who had been working to keep you alive for your entire military career. General Hayes spoke for the first time since Thompson had entered the room. Dr. Chun, would you like to show him the other photographs? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then reached into her folder and removed a final set of images. These were different from the others. They showed not award ceremonies or official recognition, but candid shots of military funerals. These are some of the operations where my intelligence wasn't good enough, Sarah said quietly. Where my analysis missed something, or where the information I provided wasn't sufficient to prevent casualties. She pointed to the first photograph. Staff Sergeant Williams, killed in an IED attack that I failed to predict. I had analyzed the pattern of previous attacks, but I missed the behavioral indicators that would have suggested this location was being targeted. The second photograph showed a different funeral. Lieutenant Morrison, killed in an ambush that I should have seen coming. The intercepted communications contained clues about enemy movements that I misinterpreted. Sarah's voice remained steady, but Thompson could see the weight of these failures in her expression. Corporal Davidson, Sergeant Miller, Captain Thompson, no relation to you. All killed in operations where my intelligence was insufficient or incorrect. She gathered the photographs and returned them to her folder. Marcus, you asked me what I had given to this country. I've given 25 years of my life to work that saved thousands of people I'll never meet, and I've carried the responsibility for every person my failures couldn't save. I've sacrificed relationships because my work was too classified to explain, recognition because my contributions had to remain secret, and any hope of a normal life because the mission always came first. I've lived with the knowledge that getting something wrong could cost lives, and I've accepted that no one would ever know if I got something right. Thompson tried to speak, but Sarah wasn't finished. But More than that, I've given this country my faith in its values and my belief in its promise. Even when I've encountered people like you, people who looked at me and saw only what they expected to see, I've continued to believe that America is worth protecting. Even when you spent weeks telling me that I didn't belong here, that I had never served, that I was taking advantage of American generosity without giving anything back, I continued to work to keep Americans safe, including you. Sarah stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the Pentagon parking lot where thousands of people worked every day to protect the country they all served. Marcus, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty or to seek some kind of revenge for how you treated me. I'm telling you this because I think you need to understand what service really means. Service isn't about recognition or advancement or even about wearing a uniform. Service is about doing the right thing when no one is watching, when no one will thank you, when no one will ever know what you sacrificed. Service is about treating every person you encounter as someone worthy of respect and dignity, because you never know who they really are or what they've given for the country you both serve. Sarah returned to her seat and looked directly at Thompson. You're a good soldier, Marcus. Your record shows courage, skill, and dedication. But leadership requires more than tactical competence. It requires the wisdom to recognize that heroism comes in many forms, that sacrifice often goes unrecognized, and that the most important battles are sometimes fought by people who will never receive medals for their service. General Hayes stood up. Dr. Chun, it's time. Sarah nodded and gathered her papers. Marcus, I hope your remaining time in the military helps you develop the kind of judgment and character that true leadership requires. I hope you learn to see people as they really are, not as you expect them to be. As the group prepared to leave the conference room, General Hayes turned back to Thompson. Lieutenant Commander, Dr. Chun is retiring today after 25 years of service. She will receive no public recognition, no ceremony, no official acknowledgement of her contributions. But she will receive something that very few people in the history of our intelligence services have ever received. Sir, she will receive the personal salute of 4 general officers who understand the true value of her service. What happened next was unlike anything Thompson had ever witnessed in his military career. General Hayes, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute to the woman Thompson had dismissed as an uneducated immigrant janitor. General Chun, General Torres, and General Morrison followed suit, 4 of the most powerful military leaders in America showing their respect for someone whose contributions would never be publicly acknowledged. Sarah Chun, Dr. Sarah Chun, Senior Intelligence Analyst, Terrorism Prevention Specialist, and Silent Guardian of American Security, stood at attention and returned their salute with the dignity and grace of someone who had earned every moment of recognition she was finally receiving. As the ceremony concluded and the generals filed out of the room, Sarah paused at the door and looked back at Thompson one final time. Marcus, she said, I hope you find what you're looking for. This time, Thompson understood exactly what she meant. He wasn't looking for someone to blame or someone to diminish or someone to humiliate. He was looking for the kind of person he could respect in the mirror, the kind of character that would make him worthy of the trust and authority he had been given, the kind of wisdom that would help him recognize heroism when it appeared in unexpected forms. As Sarah Chun walked out of his life forever, Marcus Thompson finally began to understand the difference between wearing a uniform and actually serving, between earning recognition and deserving respect, between being powerful and being worthy of power. The lesson had cost him his career, his reputation, and his future in the military. But it had also given him something he had never possessed before: the humility to recognize that true heroism often wears no uniform at all, carries no rank, and asks for no recognition other than the quiet satisfaction of duty fulfilled and service rendered. In the end, perhaps that education was worth the price he had paid to receive it. Perhaps it was worth everything. The woman who had been mocked by a Navy SEAL had received the salutes of 4 generals. But more importantly, she had given a broken man the chance to learn what honor really meant, even if that lesson came too late to save the career he had thrown away through his own prejudice and pride. Some lessons are learned in classrooms. Others are learned in the ruins of our own making. Marcus Thompson had learned his lesson well, but the teacher was gone, and the classroom was closed forever.